Today I'm going to explore the question, who in the year 2019 has the best claim to the title of Roman Emperor? Now, I'll tell you up front that this question has no simple, clear-cut answer, but hopefully by exploring it, we can learn a bit of history and have some fun. In the first part of the video, I'll be outlining 5 different ways that the question could be answered. Then, in the second part, I'll be letting several other history YouTubers give you their opinion on who has the best claim. So let's start off at the beginning of the Roman Empire. The first Roman emperor was Augustus Caesar, and he reigned from 27 BCE to 14 CE. After that, we get a bunch of emperors, some of whom were okay, and some of whom were downright crazy. Then we come to a period in which we get what's called the 5 good emperors. This is the period in which Rome reached its peak and, for the most part, experienced peace throughout the core parts of the empire. After that, it was sort of a slow ride downhill. Soon after the 5 good emperors, we get a period known as the crisis of the 3rd century, in which Rome pretty much got a new emperor every other year. Basically, the Roman Empire had grown so big that it had become hard for any one person to hold on to power very long. Eventually, along came an emperor named Diocletian, and he basically split the empire in 2, creating the Tetrarchy. He took the title of emperor, or Augustus, in the east and let someone else be emperor in the west. Each emperor also had a junior emperor working under them, called a Caesar. So really there were 4 rulers, hence the term Tetrarchy, rule by 4. This didn't actually work out though, because eventually there was a bunch of fighting between the Western Emperor and the Eastern Emperor, and this culminated in Emperor Constantine defeating his rival and becoming the sole emperor. He shifted the capital east to Constantinople, making it a new or second Rome. Thus, the East became as important, if not more important, than the West. After he died, there was sometimes 2 emperors and sometimes 1. Then, finally, the split became permanent. Shortly after the permanent division, several barbarian groups crossed the Rhine River into the western part of the empire. In fact, the city of Rome itself was sacked for the first time in 800 years, and by 476, the Western Roman Empire was finished. But in the east, things continued. Historians often refer to the Eastern Roman Empire at this point as the Byzantine Empire. But at the time, they simply saw themselves as the legitimate continuation of the Roman Empire. In fact, around 552 CE, Emperor Justinian was able to reconquer Rome, and although it was no longer the capital, they held on to the city until the rise of Charlemagne, which brings us to the year 800. And this is where we have to make our first major decision when it comes to which line we feel is the more legitimate successor to the original Roman Empire. Basically, at this point, Charlemagne, king of the Franks, had conquered most of Western Europe, and over in Constantinople, the title of emperor had fallen to a woman for the first time ever. Charlemagne used this as an opportunity to declare himself the true emperor of Rome, and in fact, the Pope agreed and crowned him as such. He is often seen as being the first Holy Roman Emperor, although in reality it took some time for that entity to evolve. In addition to this, there has always been some debate on what exactly the Holy Roman Empire was. It was famously said to be neither holy, nor Roman, nor an empire. But leaving all that aside, I want you to consider at this point, which side do you feel is the true successor to the glory that was once Rome? The Western Holy Roman Empire or the Eastern Byzantine Empire? Because for the next 650 years or so, they coexisted, and both claimed to be the legitimate successor state. Now, before we go on, I should mention that there was actually a suggestion made at the time that these two should marry. That certainly would have changed things and made our task a lot easier. But alas, it was not so. Which brings us to 1453. That's the year that Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Turks. So if you're a supporter of the Byzantine side, you have another decision to make at this point. Obviously, as the conquerors of Second Rome, the Ottoman dynasty certainly has a good claim on being the true successors of the original Roman Empire. They held on to power for another 450 years, and although Turkey is now a republic, an heir to the Ottoman dynasty does still exist. That person is Dündar Ali Osman, and he's the first of the 5 people I'm putting forward as possible claimants to the title of Roman Emperor. Now, it could be argued that it doesn't matter that the Ottoman Empire was Muslim, not Christian, because the Roman Empire had already changed its religion once in its history, so why not again? But this is just one option. Let's look at the others. Going back to 1453, I'd like to point out that the last Byzantine emperor had a legal will, and in that will he left all of his titles, including the title of Roman Emperor, to Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain. Rumor has it that they paid him for that legacy, but also that the King of France had also paid him for the same title a few years earlier. But if we want to rely on a strictly legal argument, we could say that the current heir of Ferdinand and Isabella is also the legal heir to the title of Roman Emperor. So that person would be King Philippe VI of Spain. He also makes a good candidate because he's the only one of these 5 that is actually already a monarch today. But there's one more candidate for the Byzantine supporters out there. The last Byzantine emperor had a brother who claimed to be emperor after the fall of Constantinople. That person had a daughter who went on to marry Ivan the Great of Moscow. Because of this, Russia later claimed that Moscow was the third Rome and that the Russian Empire was the true successor state to the original Roman Empire. They even named their monarchs Tsar after the Roman word Caesar. To add to their claim, there's also the fact that the Russian Orthodox Church, for much of the modern period, did in fact end up replacing the Greek Orthodox Church as sort of the center of Eastern Christianity. So, of course, the Russian Empire no longer exists, but if you're convinced by the Russian argument, you'll want to find out who the current heir to the Russian throne is. Now, that's actually a bit of a complicated question in itself, and I actually have a separate video on that topic, which I'll link to in the description. But perhaps the best Russian candidate is a fellow by the name of Andrew Romanov. So he's the third of the 5 candidates that I'd like to point out. So these 3 options are all linked to the idea that the Byzantine Empire was the true successor state to the original Roman Empire. However, if one were to support the idea that the Holy Roman Empire was actually the true successor state, we get a different set of options. On that side, I'm going to give you 2 options. As I mentioned earlier, the Holy Roman Empire lasted over 1,000 years and actually outlived the Byzantine Empire by over 350 years. It finally came to an end in 1806 because of this guy here, Napoleon Bonaparte. After conquering most of Europe, Napoleon famously grabbed the imperial crown and crowned himself emperor in the presence of the Pope in a manner comparable to the way that Charlemagne had been crowned over 1,000 years earlier. Of course, Napoleon's empire was short-lived, as was the resurrected version under Napoleon III. But it certainly could be argued that Napoleon was and is the closest thing that Europe has seen to a Roman emperor since the days of Rome itself. So if you're convinced that Napoleon truly was the true successor of everything that we think of when we think of the Roman Empire, then you'll want to look at who the current Bonapartist heir is today. And that person is Jean-Christophe. He's not a direct descendant of Napoleon himself, but rather a descendant of Napoleon's brother Jerome. Finally, it must be pointed out that the Holy Roman Empire did sort of continue after 1806 in the form of the Austrian Empire, which lasted up until the end of World War I. Except for a few minor exceptions, the title of Holy Roman Emperor and then Austrian Emperor was held all the way from 1440 to 1912 by a single family, the House of Habsburg. So it certainly could be argued that the current head of the House of Habsburg has the best claim to the title of Roman Emperor. And there is no debate about who that head of house is. It's this man here, Karl von Habsburg. So he's the fifth and final person that I'd like to put forward as having the best claim. Beyond these five, we could come up with others. We could argue for the Pope, for example, or for the heir to the throne of Italy. But these five are the five that I think have the best claim. I'm now going to let several other history YouTubers weigh in with their thoughts. Then, at the end, I'll come back with my own top pick.
For my money, it's got to be the Russians. The Eastern Empire was the continuation of the Roman Empire, so the Bonapartes, Habsburgs, you're out. They've got a blood connection that beats any will, so the Spanish, you're out. And they're Orthodox Christians, which is still the religion of the European half of the Eastern Empire, so it's got to be the Romanovs or Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. That's my wild card choice.
First of all, the Roman Empire's capital was changed to Constantinople, and Constantinople was taken over by the Ottomans, ending the Eastern Roman Empire, which was an actual part of the Roman Empire at one point. None of the other empires ever bridged the East and the West the way that the Ottomans and Romans did. Mehmed II, who conquered Constantinople, was actually recognized as the successor to the Romans by the Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople. Also, the Ottoman sultans probably had some blood claim as well, since they married Byzantine nobility, including princesses, all the time. Now, after the abolition of the Ottoman Empire, some of the Ottoman princes moved to Syria, and Dundar Ali-Osman was born there. He's the great-grandson of Sultan Abdulhamid II of the Armenian genocide fame. In 1974, ban was lifted from the Ottomans by Turkey, and they could return to Istanbul, not Constantinople. However, Dundar Ali-Osman refused to return, even though most of his family did. Try and tell me that's not the ego of a Roman emperor.
Okay, well, for the sake of argument, let's look at this logically. What makes a kingdom a kingdom? What makes an emperor an emperor? Sure, you can call yourself a king or an emperor, but as long as no one else acknowledges it, like your subjects or even other countries, you're just a crazy person proclaiming something no one will listen to. Trust me, I'm speaking from experience. So to look at who is the true claimant to the Roman throne, we have to look at who actually has been recognized the most by others as the claimant, not who claimed it just themselves. To start with, we have to recognize that no one sensible will argue that the Byzantine Empire isn't a true successor to the Eastern Roman Empire, but the Byzantine Empire fell in 1453, so who is the successor now? Well, Napoleon can be ruled out. No one ever thought of him as the claimant to the Roman throne, let alone the Holy Roman Empire, and for most of his reign, other countries didn't even want to acknowledge him as the King of France, let alone anything else. Next are the Romanov, which outside of their self-claim to the throne that no one took seriously, weren't even close to controlling any areas of the former Roman Empire. Then come the Ottomans, and I don't think I have to explain why no one thought of them as the successor to the Romans. So who can people agree on being a successor to the Romans? Well, Charlemagne is the most prominent one, being crowned by the Pope, the religious successor of the Western Roman Empire, as the Holy Roman Emperor, effectively creating the basis for the medieval political entity known as the Holy Roman Empire. Therefore, the Holy Roman Empire can be viewed as the successor to the Roman Empire, at least the Western Roman Empire. And who are in everyone's minds the main monarchs of the Holy Roman Empire? Yes, the Habsburgs. They are the successors to a state created by Charlemagne, a person viewed as the successor of at least the Western Roman Empire, if not the whole. They have also on many occasions been crowned by the religious successor of the Western Roman Empire, the Pope, as the emperors of the Holy Roman Empire. And lastly, the ruling Spanish line, which the last Byzantine Empire, the successor of the Eastern Roman Empire, left its titles to in his will, died out and was replaced by none other than the Habsburgs. So in a way, the Habsburgs are the ones who united the Eastern and the Western Roman Empire yet again, hence making them the true modern claimants of the Roman Empire.
So, who has the title of Roman Emperor today? Well, to answer that question, let's refer to our handy-dandy European royal family tree chart available now. So, first of all, anyone who tries to tell you that the Holy Roman Empire was the successor state to Rome is trying to sell you something, because Rome kept on chugging along. And it kept on chugging, and it kept on chugging until it falls to the Ottomans. Now, does that mean that the Ottomans are the new Roman emperors? Let me answer that question with another question. When Warsaw was given to Prussia at the end of the 18th century, did William II become the new King of Poland? Not exactly, it just kind of stopped existing. So, we are then left with two choices. We can follow the Spanish claim, which you might have a point there, but honestly, they never really did anything with that. It's mostly lip service. So what we're left with is just to follow the bloodline of the last Roman emperors. So we go back from Constantine, John's already gone, back up to his brother Thomas, and we follow that line down until we hit the Tsars of Russia. I don't think this makes Russia the third Rome, as it likes to think it was, but certainly, if anyone has a claim to being connected to all of this mess, it is the Tsars, which brings us all the way down to the Russian Empire, to poor dead Nicholas II, and then there's a whole mess after that. But certainly, in here, in his bloodline somewhere, is your current Emperor of Rome.
Hello, it's Jasmine from a long, long time ago. The first choice Matt gives us is between Irene and Charlemagne. Irene is the legitimate empress. Charlemagne conquered most of Western Europe, but the Roman Empire was now in the east, and the capital was Constantinople. So in reality, his claim was like if he was living in a semi-detached house and claiming the house number of the house next door, because the whole thing used to be one house. It doesn't add up. In 1453, the Ottomans took Constantinople and pretty much swallowed up the remains of the Byzantine Empire. In other words, they'd conquered it. When William the Conqueror invaded England in 1066, he took the title of King of England, and there's no debate about whether or not King William was the real King of England. So, in the same light, we can see that the Ottomans were the new inheritors of the Roman Empire, and thus, Dündar Ali Osman has the best claim to the title of Roman Emperor.
Hey there, this is Barris. And of course the House of Bonaparte has the best claim to the title of Roman Emperor. Who better than the man who was crowned Emperor with the blessing of the Pope himself, who was coronated with a laurel wreath, whose troops proudly carried the Roman eagle standard unto battle. And if the Holy Roman Empire was the descendant of the Roman Empire, then who but the man who destroyed it has the right to call himself the new Roman Emperor? And thus, his current heir, Jean-Christophe Napoleon Bonaparte, has the best claim to the title of Roman Emperor.
I agree that the Napoleonic line has the best claim, but would argue that a different Prince Napoleon is the current heir. Although the will of Louis, Prince Napoleon, named as his heir his grandson, Jean-Christophe, the traditional succession rightly belongs to Jean-Christophe's father, Charles. Louis's choice to name the only son of Charles as Louis's heir broke with the traditional father to eldest son rules of succession, and the fact that Louis was irritated by the political leanings of Charles is not sufficient reason to deny him his rightful claim on the throne. Blood must be followed in the matter of such succession, or the dynasty loses all credibility. Otherwise, how can we recognize the sanctity of a royal or imperial line of succession at all?
Hey, Cypher here, and I'm going to have to go with the Romanovs. Not only because the family used to be called Tsar, as in Caesar, but also because the Byzantine Empire kind of had the real lineage of the Roman Empire. Plus, the current head of the family is an American citizen.
This is Amanda from Fiveable. Who gets the best claim to the Roman Empire goes all the way back to that initial split between Charlemagne and Irene. Irene doesn't get the throne because she's a woman. What is that? So if we just follow her line, then I'm going to go with Dunder Ali Osman. Irene, by the way, was kind of a Cersei-like figure and like gouged out the eyes of her son. But regardless of her badassery, I still think that her line of succession has the best claim to the throne. So Dunder Ali Osman is my guy.
Hey there, Tom Richey here, and thanks for having me on the show, Matt. I'm going to go with Andrew Romanov because I think that the whole Three Rome story is just a beautiful story, and at the end of the day, history needs a story in order to happen. So that's my take. Let's hand it to the Russians.
Hey, House of History here, and I am also going to have to go with the Romanovs, though other people have already explained why the Romanovs would make a good fit as the successor of the Roman Emperor. And I'll show you on this fancy chart where exactly Prince Romanov would be. It is around here. Though Prince Romanov would not probably accept any title. During the Second World War, he did not even want to be promoted to officer in the British Army fighting against the Germans. It's a very humble man. And if you refuse the rank of officer in the British Army, then it's pretty not likely that you would be happy being the heir of the Roman Emperor.
This is Tarek from Hikma History, and I think the House of Osman, the House of the Ottomans, has the best claim to the title of the Roman Emperor. This is because when Sultan Mehmed II conquered Constantinople in 1453 and the remainder of the Byzantine Empire afterwards, he assumed the title of Caesar-i Rum, meaning the Caesar of Rome. In addition, the second Ottoman leader, Orhan I, actually married a Byzantine princess, thereby establishing blood relations to the Romans. Therefore, I think Dunder Ali Osman, the current head of the Ottoman family, has the best claim to the title of Roman Emperor.
If the empire were to be restored, an Eastern emperor claiming rulership over Western Europe wouldn't go well, and vice versa. Therefore, I would like to put forth two options. Karl von Habsburg would be the most likely contender to the Western throne. In the East, the best option would be Andrew Romanov. A popular marriage between the children of Karl and Andrew might mend the schism. The artist Rostislav Romanov and the fashion model Eleanor von Habsburg would make an incredible couple. However, Eleanor is happily engaged, so we would probably have to wait a few more generations to see a united Roman Empire.
Okay, so there you have it. Over a dozen opinions on who has the best claim. At this point, if it came down to a vote, it looks like the Russian candidate would win, with the Ottoman candidate coming in as a close second. But as I promised, I'm going to finish up by sharing my own opinion. And my own opinion is that everyone you have heard so far is wrong. You probably know the saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans would do. Well, let's change that to when thinking about Rome, think like the Romans would think. And there's one thing that the Romans thought a lot about, and that is the law. Besides the Latin alphabet, probably the most significant contribution that ancient Rome has given to the modern world is their legal system. In fact, most of the legal systems used in the world today have in some way been strongly influenced by Roman law. So I don't think that Romans would be convinced by any argument based on bloodlines, religion, who looks best wearing a laurel wreath, what some other barbarian country would say, or even by who controls their capital city. What I think they would be convinced by is a good, solid legal argument. And the only person of the five that has a claim based on a legal argument is the one person that no one so far has chosen to support, and that is King Philip VI of Spain. Here's what I think. First of all, I'm going to agree with the majority so far and say that the Byzantine Empire was indeed the legitimate continuation of the original Roman Empire. From a legal standpoint, there was absolutely no break in the line of succession. In other words, the government of Rome, or the state known as Rome, kept chugging along, even during the few years that the Latin Crusaders took over in Constantinople. And sure, when Constantinople fell for good in 1453, a few frightened religious leaders declared that the Ottoman Sultan was now the new Caesar of Rome. But in no way did the state of Rome transfer itself to the control of the Ottomans. After all, the Ottomans at the time followed a completely different legal system. What happened is that the state of Rome, existing now in the person of the emperor, went into exile. So when Constantine XI died in the battle against the Ottomans, his brother Thomas escaped to Rome, where he was recognized throughout the rest of Christian Europe as the legitimate Emperor of the East, a title which was then inherited by his son Andreas. Now, before he died, Andreas made a will. In the eyes of Roman law, a legally binding will. And in that will, he left the title of Roman Emperor to King Ferdinand of Aragon and Queen Isabella of Castile. Their titles, of course, were then inherited by Charles, who became both King of Spain and Holy Roman Emperor. During his lifetime, Charles controlled more of Western Europe than any other person since the glory days of Rome. Now, when he died, he split his titles between his son Philip and his brother Ferdinand, but don't get confused. Although Ferdinand got the fancy title of Holy Roman Emperor, it was Philip who was considered to be the more senior heir. Therefore, the old Byzantine title, although no longer officially claimed by the Spanish at this point, would legally have belonged to him, to Philip. And even though there has since been a change of house when it comes to the monarchy of Spain, there is a direct legal line of succession all the way from Philip II of Spain to the current king, Philip VI of Spain. So if a Roman court were forced to decide today who the legal heir of the title Roman Emperor was, I think they would go with Philip VI. And beyond the legal argument, he's got a lot of other great things going for him. First of all, he's the only one of our 5 candidates that is already a monarch. And the kingdom that he reigns over exists within the borders of the original Roman Empire. In fact, if we look at his full title, you'll see that he also already claims to reign over a bunch of other former Roman territories, including some in Italy and even Jerusalem. He's also a Roman Catholic and speaks a Romance language. And if you're into bloodlines, he's got an excellent pedigree. He's pretty much related to every other royal person that has ever reigned in Europe. In fact, we could probably find a connection to a Byzantine emperor. In fact, I know we could, or even to one of the original Roman emperors if we looked hard enough. And finally, and this is really, really important, like me, he rocks a pretty good beard. And as we all know, the best Roman emperors were the ones with beards. Okay, I want to thank all the other YouTubers who participated in this. It's been a lot of fun. But before you go, be sure to click on the little circle with the letter I in it, which should be located on the top right-hand corner of the screen. If you do that, you can vote in a small poll and tell us which of the 5 candidates you think deserves that title. And be sure to comment as well and tell us in more detail what you think of the topic.